Good to see you, and I wanted to take this chance to share some of the excitement going on. It's a different kind of excitement. The first couple of years were crisis excitement, just one series of efforts to sort of stem the hemorrhaging of the money out of public education and sort of the chaos of the annual avalanche of pink slips and the problem. So I'm here to just share some things going on I think are really important. We're at a critical turning point. I think in my years of observation from starting teaching in 1973, I think we're turning a corner in greater public awareness about the public education system and how far we're behind where we should be, but also the willingness that was reflected in the vote last year to invest in education, to put some money down to say we need to improve our public schools and not just keep cutting them and hoping things are going to get better. So, from the crisis of the past couple of years, we came out with 30. We came out with 39 passing. We came out with 89 local ballot.
39 pass. 39 what? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Prop 39.
Prop 39
yeah.
pass.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah.
Good to see you. Good to see you. So, in my many years of observation, but particularly over the last 20 years, I'm very optimistic. I think we're in a better place. It was time after time, year after year, neglect, lack of focus. California education went from the top to right near the bottom on academic performance, and it's a disgraceful place to be. We need to turn it around and move it up. But I think those votes, the public debate that came from the governor's leadership, first in tackling the budget, making some gruesome choices and forcing the legislature, working with the legislature to enact billions and billions, 40 billions in cuts. It began to get the public's attention riveted where it should be on the value and importance of public education. I was just mentioning as you were coming in, not just 30 and 39 passed, but 89 local ballot measures passed out of 106, so a very high percent pass rate, about 85% pass rate, representing
school
bonds. Yeah. So
are they bonds or
most of that number is bonds. There were also parcel taxes, where the majority of those I think also passed. They had a higher threshold, so they didn't quite get there, but 55%.
So 89 school bonds out of how many?
About 106.
Out of 106?
Yeah, I think that's about an 85% pass rate.
Yeah.
And that represented public commitment, local debate, local prioritization, lots of issues, but overall people said, we'll invest in our local schools because we believe they deserve it and we need to see improvements. And that was pretty phenomenal. That's about $14 billion in public investment, saying we will increase taxes to afford more modern schools, bring in technology, bring in the STEM, the science labs, bring in the energy efficiency, build new schools where there's growth. So I was heartened by those statistics and the turnaround. And so part of that is coupled with investing, and I can share what we're doing now to plan for 2014 for a statewide ballot measure to refill the state coffers on investing in the right way in our schools' physical infrastructure. We're working on that and getting that shaped up. But parallel to that is this.
I'm sorry, give me that. What are you doing statewide 2014?
I'm pushing for a statewide bond measure. I'm saying it should be like the ones we've done previously, which I authored. I was a key architect of the original Senate Bill 50 that started. We did a series of $9 billion, 4 times, going to the voters, about $36 billion in investment. And the way we set up Senate Bill 50 was a 50-50 match on new construction and a 70-30 match on rehabilitation and modernization.
So how will this one be set up?
We're in the middle of working on that. Joan Buchanan's taking the lead. She's going to be the author of the bond measure. One of the things that I have been insisting on is that we look at the process of delivering, how we can improve the process of delivering the approval of the plans and the implementation of the plans. And so the State Allocation Board, which I've sat on for many years, as well. Joan is a leader on the board, and she's conducting a process of looking at each of the categories and looking at the needs and have they changed. And there's frankly going to be more of a need on modernization. We have a stock of buildings, something like 60,000 school buildings, and they're decades old, and they need to be modernized and set up for 21st century learning. So I expect that there'll be a bill emerging early in 2014 that will have gone through a big vetting process with all stakeholders. I pulled together the new state architect, the head of the state allocation board, general services, to, instead of different plans sitting on one office's desk and then waiting months to go to the next office, having teamwork and modernizing the
Tom,
whole
if you had a
process.
choice, which would you prefer? Money for construction or money for classrooms?
I think you need them both, and there's an interesting blend in there, because you need money for technology, you need money for good science labs. So our schools are woefully behind the rest of the nation in technology, and that's one of the things I'll share with you. And I was shifting, you asked a question on the bond. I think overall we need to keep the investment going to the operations and need to figure out the right funding formula. The governor's put that challenge out. How do we more fairly, more transparently, more logically have a funding system that we can understand and puts money in the places where it's needed and invested well.
Let me, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but,
Yeah, no, that's good.
let me ask you, because school bonds, as you say, that doesn't seem to be a problem getting passed for the most part.
The local measures
The
are
local
doing pretty
measures.
well.
They're
55%.
They're doing quite well, and they've got the 55% threshold. Let me give you just sort of my take and
Mhm.
see what, and get
Yeah.
you to react to this, okay? Prop 30 was $6 billion a year. Prop 30 will run out, after 15, 16 it declines and runs out another year and a half after that, or whatever it is, right?
Goes offline.
Goes offline. $6 billion a year. We just have had Cal STRS and the LAO say to begin to write the pension system, the school pension system, they need $4.5 billion. Money's fungible, if you will. So you basically may be netted, and some of that Prop 30 money wasn't all to go to schools, right? So you may be netted 1.5 to fight over. You don't have much net gain in operations here, if you're going to do this responsible thing. But you're not having any problem passing money for buildings.
Mm-hmm.
Why are you focusing on buildings
Well,
when the problem seems to
Sure.
be money for the classrooms?
Well, actually, I'm not focusing on it except to answer your questions.
Yeah.
But I was about
Okay,
to launch.
but
I'm
you
about
see
to
where
launch
I'm-
into
you see
the
where I'm going,
revolutionary
right?
change in learning that's
Okay,
taking place.
okay.
The Common Core and the implementation
I mean,
of the
but
new science standard.
but from the
Sure.
numbers perspective,
From a numbers perspective,
is that really where we want to go?
you want to address the fact that we're 49th in the nation in per pupil spending.
Really?
That is a horrible place to be. That is, again, disgraceful for a state of our capacity. But I also answered that they both need to be addressed. And when you go to the local voters, it's an add-on investment. It's not taking away the money for operations. It, in fact, may save hundreds of millions of dollars by bringing in the energy efficiency, the solar, in certain places where that makes sense. We can have cost avoidance on paying, SoCal Edison and PG&E and put that money into the operations. With the school bonds, we can wire. We need antennas that can create a Wi-Fi for students. Students in an area where there's high poverty, we have a real digital divide. We're going digital. It's exciting. It's transformational. The learning. But we have a true issue in terms of equity because certain families don't have it at home, as we know. But with investing in the bandwidth, investing in the antennas, this is part of what you do in a statewide bond measure, and you can match what the locals have done. And the statewide bond measure doesn't come out of Prop 98, so it's not competing with operational. It actually helps support the operational changes that we need. And that's the exciting part to me, is the new Common Core standards. We've got them going, we got the training going. We have 2015 spring to do the first computer adaptive testing with the new system, language arts and math. We have just adopted the new CTC, the CTE standards, the Career Technical Education standards, and the new science standards are coming out in the next few days, the next few weeks, right? That's pretty exciting. And the new learning is something that I think the business community has been yearning for a long time. Teachers have been wanting to get to a more creative place in their instruction. And this is what I think is transformational and the good news of the day, that the new Common Core approach, instead of memorizing facts and putting them back out and bubble test, we're going to have more of that critical thinking, problem solving, teamwork, good communication skills, 21st century skills. And I've been meeting with employer groups up and down the state. They're yearning for this. They need STEM, specifically a new pipeline filled with young people who want to take on the jobs of the new economy in STEM, but they need it across the board. And so the investment in the physical plant will enhance the learning that's taking place and the implementation of this new type of learning.
I'm just trying to understand the balance.
Yeah.
You know, I'm trying to understand.
I think you can do them both.
Well,
and
of course you
need to
can do it. You know, I mean, you can do them
Yeah.
both, but we are already doing them both at the local
Right.
level for the most part.
Right.
I'm just wondering whether, you know, because frankly, I share your concerns about
Right.
how horrible the
Right.
pure, you know, how poorly paid our teachers are, how we've, you know, failing
Right.
to invest in the core education. I just am not sure.
Well, I think there's a combination of factors that merge together that are really important to build public confidence, because we had a financial crisis, but we also had a crisis in public confidence in the schools. And young couples make this, have these agonizing discussions all around the state. I was in San Francisco yesterday. I was telling Dan for a UC function, and you know, you talk to young families. They're moving out because they are concerned about the public schools, and so you need to have the modern facility because it functions better and saves money and is a better learning environment. But it's also a source of pride and a source of attraction to parents to stay with those public schools. And you need to build public confidence by, again, showing the new learning that's taking place, that's meeting the needs of the new economy. It's meeting the needs of business. It's going to help our students be more ready for college as well as career. And I wanted to share with you, and we have one for each of you, and you've probably seen this, Teresa, before, but we started off with a transition team. Linda Darling Hammond and David Rattray from the LA Chamber put a team together with me, experts around the state on education, from higher education to preschool to business, and we set about, you know, working through this, and we've really made a lot of progress in the 2 years. So we have a copy for everybody. And a big part of it is this 21st century learning. And again, we have put down on a big investment on partnership academies, and you know them well. Dozier Libby Medical Health Sciences in Antioch. Antioch High has been transformed into a number of linked learning and career tech pathways. What we're finding is that kids that are in these programs are excited about their work. They're engaged. They're learning. They're not dropping out. They understand why they need to do the math homework, why they need to have good writing skills, why they need to learn good team skills, because it's all part of a vision they have in their life of where they're going career-wise. And so we have over 50,000 students now in 500 schools in these partnership academies. And we have linked learning and blended learning. I can talk more about these exciting developments. But a big part of this is addressing the curricular needs and getting money in the budget this year. We're fighting for money to help implement, doing professional development and help implement the technology part. We've done a survey. It's not totally complete because not all districts have responded, but we only have about 1/3 the computers we need to have a one-to-one computing capacity in our schools. The bandwidth, we only have about 1/3 of what we need. I have an initiative that's in here. It's called No Child Left Offline. So we have that goal of getting that technology investment. So it's all part of this 21st century learning. Again, I'm meeting with business groups, the biotech community. We met at Bayer with Johnson & Johnson and a number of other biotech companies with higher ed. We've met with aerospace, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, Boeing. What do our employers need in terms of how can we adjust our learning that's going on in middle school, even down to elementary school, right on through to graduation from high school and into our community colleges and four-year institutions. So I just want to share with you exciting things going on that's a key part of the blueprint that we laid out. The other, go
what
ahead.
kind of change in the classroom? I guess when I sit and I look at what your job is and where you sit,
Mhm.
The strength of your job, frankly, is the bullet pulpit more than anything else. I think you'd agree with that.
Yes.
You kind of have your hands tied as to actually, it's because of our crazy way we have our education governance set up. You don't really have a lot of authority to actually implement change on your own. But you do have a huge bully pulpit. And I guess what I'm curious about is what kind of change in the way we're doing things now, in specifics,
Mhm.
can we look forward to your putting forward that gets at
Mhm.
the basic breakdown in the classroom?
Well, there's the bully pulpit, the public arena, and
Yeah.
Working with editorial boards and working
Yeah,
with
right, yeah,
the day-to-day
yeah.
media. And then there's the bully pulpit of advocacy. And one advantage I have, I think, that's been useful and helpful is my knowledge of the legislature and who can carry legislation that we need, and getting the legislation lined up and being very visible. We're known as really ratcheting up the level of involvement.
But I want your. I guess
I'm
when
coming
I
to
vision,
that.
I want
Coming to
the
that.
I want the classroom
So
vision.
here's a classroom. It's now more crowded than ever before because of the cuts. We've lost $20 billion in the last 5 years. And you've been through all the agonizing school board meetings. But we have that reality. We might have 39 students in a class. We used to have 24. So the blended learning approach, just to give you an example, the power of the technology, it's going to be more individualized learning. It's going to be more teamwork. It's going to be more applying facts to problem solving. And so take this classroom, a third of the students will be working at computers. And I've walked into these classes and they don't look up. They're engaged. They're either doing math in fun games. What the computer can do, and it's magical, it takes you to the level you're at. So if you're in third grade, the way we've done testing before, it just tests you on what you know about third grade math. But now it will test you, if you don't get the third grade math, your responses to the questions will guide them to try second grade math, and then first grade math, and it'll find out exactly where that student is. It's the same if you're at third grade, but you're at fifth grade capability or sixth grade capability, you're bored silly, because if the teacher just lectured, sage on the stage, lecturing out there, a third of the class is going to be missed because they're behind and they're frustrated. A third of the class is going to be bored because they went past this, a year or 2 years ago. So the computer has a rich way to individualize instruction. The teacher gets a computer printout of exactly where the student is. The parents can access that, who have access to the internet. But more importantly, the student sees their progress. They can see a readout day to day, week to week, how they're improving. Another third of the class, another 13 students, are divided into groups. They're working on a team, problem-solving exercise. Some problem the teachers laid out to the students to work together, fast students, slower students, more verbal students, less verbal students. How do you work as a team? Then the teacher, with the other third of the class, is 1 to 13, not 1 to 39. That teacher, with the diagnostic information from the computer programs, with her own or his own look at what the student's doing and how they're progressing, and looking over their shoulder or talking to them, that teacher can give more individualized instruction to the other 13.
Do we have any data that suggests this works?
Yes, I think we can get you some data to show how much more engaged the students are. We do have data on, for instance, the partnership academies, the career focus. We can get you that, because we're seeing the graduation rate going up, the college going rate going up, and the dropout rate going down. and those are good outcomes. Again, we're so far behind, it's going to take a while to catch up.
But the partnership academies are different from what you were just describing. I mean,
yes, but they have the same elements of individualized work on a computer, teamwork, but that classroom curricular environment is focused, whether it's Health Services Academy or engineering, architecture, and building things, building trades.
Isn't it? I mean, going to the new assessment system really drives everybody in that same direction. Isn't that the idea?
Yes, and one of the reports we have to share is the new generation of testing. I want to thank you. The Times spoke out not to delay the implementation of the new assessment system.
Which is going to be a fight.
We appreciate it because a lot of districts, there are districts that are they've totally embraced it and they've had the money to do their professional development. Other districts that are behind. If we move the deadline to 2016 or 2017, it just, I think, human nature, a lot of districts will stretch it out. So we believe this is transformational because teaching to the test has been a bad thing, but teaching to this kind of test, which is again about applying information, critical thinking, problem solving, it'll drive the instruction in the classroom to be more in depth. Instead of you gotta hit this mile wide set of curricular standards on history or science, but it's only an inch deep. It's now a smaller bandwidth and deeper dive into the material.
So the fight will become, that you talk about, the fight will become over between districts who've done it or can do it and districts who can't, or will it be teachers versus somebody else versus?
The good news, Dan, is teachers are by and large embracing this. I hear excitement around the state that they like this new learning. It's more creative. It gives them a time to really delve down into deeper, richer, understanding of that subject matter. I think it's more that some districts haven't done the professional development or haven't got it as far along, and so their teachers may be eager, but they haven't put the money there to bring them through the training. There's a different way of teaching. It's a different way of thinking about things.
And a little bit of exhaustion, don't you think? I mean, from the financial crisis they've come through, now it's, we're going to ask them to do it a whole lot differently. And there's a little bit of, really?
Some
do
of
I
that.
have to?
Some of that. But
do you think that?
Yeah. But at the same time, despite the lack of funding, many districts, I would say the majority, have gone forward and getting ready, and they're ready for 2015. There's others that going to need some help. In the legislature this year, I'm encouraging, lobbying, advocating that they set aside a significant amount of money to help with this transformation. When we went to the original accountability system, the CSTs and the STAR testing, I was there, Pete Wilson was governor, I was one of the few Democrats who voted for that accountability system. There was a couple $2 billion set aside to implement it, to train teachers towards it, and to have an understanding of this new accountability system. That's been absent, so even through the crisis though, districts have felt it important enough that they've been able to put some money aside. In my office, we have a dozen people working around the state. We're doing seminars, workshops. We're working with the county offices of education. So we're really seeing excitement about this. By the way, the old system, before we had the power of the new computer age and all the social media and all that's come about, those old standards we had, proficiency at 3rd grade or 4th grade in math or language arts, out of 6.25 million students, we lifted 900,000 students to proficiency under that old system. And so we did accomplish something, but it's an outdated system. I've recommended suspending, by the way, to save about $15 million, suspending the testing under the old system. Any testing that's not federally required, to just stop doing it. Why should we be taking time out to take tests and study how to take the test? Why take the teacher's time and the student's time to test under the old standards? The new standards are here. Let's use this money and this time to gear up for these new Common Core standards. 2 other areas I just want to hit the big picture is we talk about educator excellence. In this original report we say this is key. We need to have the best teacher workforce, the best professional workforce possible for our kids. Every kid deserves that great teacher in front of them conducting the instruction. And so we've done a number of things recommended here, and we've been moving ahead on some of them unilaterally, and some of them are going to rely on the legislature's help to fund them. There's a bell curve in life, and there are the outstanding, excellent teachers. They're revved up, and they from day one, week one, they're natural-born teachers, and they get it. And so there's that group at one end of the bell curve, and then there's another group that may struggle, or they may not be suited for the teaching profession. So how do you at the beginning end recruit more of the people who will be top teachers?
Let me ask you a different question. How do you get rid of the ones that are outside a couple standard deviations?
There's a good couple of ways to go about that. And our report, Greatness by Design, which we have here for you as well, talks about it. First, at the beginning, recruit more of the teachers who are likely to succeed.
Yeah, but
And then before tenure, the report we did with Chris Steinhauser was co-chair with Linda Darling Hammond. Chris Steinhauser is Long Beach Unified, incredible leader. They say they're one of the top 10 school systems on the planet. But he doesn't have any trouble getting rid of the struggling teachers who aren't improving.
LA Unified?
No, it's Long Beach. Long Beach. Because he has a couple of systems. One is called PAR, Peer Assistance Review, where a teacher is struggling in a particular subject matter, and the test scores and observations may identify that this teacher's behind, where the students in that class are behind all the other third grade teachers or high school science classes. Bring in then peers. If it's a chemistry teacher, bring in the peers who are the chemistry teachers that are doing very well, and they become part of the evaluation team, and they set benchmarks and goals for that teacher to improve. And if the teacher does not improve, they're coaching that teacher out of the profession. And when that teacher finally meets with Chris Steinhauser, the teacher already knows they're going to be let go because their peers have told them, you're not cutting it. And it's cheating the kids to not have a teacher up to par to help. BITSA, we have a bill in this year. BITSA was flexed. BITSA is a mentoring program for teachers during the induction period. So you not only get the best and train them well for the new Common Core and the STEM, dealing with English learners, but then you help support them, because some of the teachers that are struggling with the right support, we can, before tenure deadline sets, we can get them on their way to being very successful teachers. Now, there are other types of, how do you get rid of the very bad teachers, the ones that are creating the child abuse. And thank you, Contra Costa Times, because Matthias has done a great job, and the newspaper's done a great job exposing something that's terrible in the existing school climate and school conditions. And so tougher laws are needed on that. And so
What would you suggest?
we have a number of bills. We're working with Joan Buchanan on, I'm supporting both of her measures. I haven't come out all together and supported. We think there's some additional things that can be done. She has the bill on mandatory reporting, and I'm supporting that wholeheartedly.
Okay, let's talk about that for a second. Your timing's perfect.
Moving right into that
Moving right
spot on
Let's
your
talk about-
agenda.
Let's talk about mandatory reporting for a second.
Sure.
Her bill basically says each school district should develop a policy. You saw our story probably yesterday morning on Antioch.
I did. I haven't read all
Okay.
details, but it was another horror story.
Antioch has a reporting system. They have a policy. Why do you think, time and time again with districts that have policies, and we still have these things, why do we think that just simply writing a bill that says thou shalt have a policy is going to make one iota of difference?
I don't think that.
So
I think
what would you
a bill
propose?
is part of a help to it, but we also need to use the CTC. We need to have those who aren't following the law prosecuted by DAs. It happened in San Jose, Santa Clara County.
Wait a minute, we also need to use the CTC.
California Teaching Credentialing Commission.
Okay.
I'll show you a letter I wrote about a year back after Miramonte's situation. I asked the CTC to start investigating its own internal procedures. How can we get teachers who are disciplined or dismissed for not reporting, how can we get them in front of the Teaching Credentialing Commission and have their credential or administrative certificate
Tom,
reviewed?
my question's on the reporting on the front end.
Right. So we know it's not working because some of the teachers have been through the workshop and they still haven't reported. So we know it's not 100%. I guess I should have framed it as we need to change the climate. And I think we're turning a corner because of good investigative reporting and because these incidents are so terrible. And as a teacher, it just horrifies me to think that there are teachers out there that you know, that are creating the abuse, and that there are others who are turning their heads away from their responsibility. And so creating that climate of accountability includes having prosecution by DAs when there is a non-report, you know, someone has missed their mandatory obligation.
Tom, we have in the Antioch case, it was a special ed middle level manager. In the Brentwood case, it was the principal and the superintendent. In the down the peninsula, it was the principal who actually was convicted.
Right.
In Moraga, we had administrators. These aren't even the teachers who failed to get the word. These are the people who should know. My question to you
because
is
the climate
why,
isn't as accountable as it should be, and the issues
you
it
think
was
it's
swept
just
under the
you
carpet.
think it's just going to change from a climate?
It's going to take hard work on multiple fronts: legislation, legal, prosecution, and the mandatory reporting. We have to analyze what
But
kind of mandatory reporting and is it effective. So that goes.
The mandatory reporting, don't you think it would be effective if it was actually done?
Well, that's her bill.
No, it's not her bill. Her bill is establish a policy.
No, her. Okay.
You need to go back and
I'll
read her
check.
bill then. Because all her
my-
bill does, and we editorialized on this point already, all her bill does is say each district shall have a policy.
And training in the first 6 weeks.
You have to have training the first 6 weeks of school. Everybody, classified and certificated.
Right now
Her
there's-
bill requires it. Now it's optional. Today's law is optional.
Why do you think in these we've had these districts that have the training, that have the policies, it ain't working?
Because people thought, perhaps, I'm speculating, but that they wouldn't get caught. And you know, you take it whether it's.
I don't think that's the problem.
Well, and as you guys
It's a
pointed out, though,
combination.
a lot of the folks who say they're doing training is when you sign your employment sheet, it says, oh, by the way, you're supposed to mandatory report, and you sign that piece of paper, and they're calling that training.
That's right, and there's nothing in Jones' bill that changes that.
But you don't change but when you, for example, you know, we do sexual harassment training, right? And every when you work in the legislature, for example, every 2 years you've got to go take your ethics training and your
So do
sexual
we.
harassment training,
So do
right?
we.
You know,
And-
there's
and
been a
there was
transformational change. There was
That's
a sea
right.
change, and we
That's
need the
right.
same thing here.
But that's not what Jones' bill
Well,
does.
it's-
Number one.
there's a number of other bills, too.
Number two.
Yeah.
The other problem with it is it's a program created from within the very district and administration that's failing to implement now. I was hoping what I was going to hear from you is that from your bully pulpit position, having seen our editorials, you would say, yeah, my office needs to step forward and
Well-
develop the standard for training
Well, guess
that
what?
everybody
We
can
actually have a
use.
team working on this. So Craig Cheslog, my special assistant, you know Craig, he's got
Everybody
a team.
knows Craig.
Everybody knows Craig. So he's got a couple of the deputies, branch deputies, working and looking at every aspect of this. There's several other places. There's a statute of limitations issue. There's there's several legal issues that still aren't clear in all the bills that are out there.
Yeah, but on the mandatory.
And then in terms of
mandatory
developing
reporting,
guidelines, we had a
we-
discussion just the other day about how do we get a boilerplate minimum standards kind of policy established. And so we're looking at that.
And so it would be a policy or a training.
Well, the policy would include a training guideline. You know, having you go online and watch something, is that adequate? There's a question about that. Adequate training. What are the most effective trainings? And part of it is sorting out all that's happened. How many of the people that have been guilty of not reporting have had training, and what kind of training did they have? And what was their relationship? There was another case in Antioch, I think it was in a charter school, of a mom and the daughter was doing the abuse, and the mom was the principal, and it didn't get reported.
Okay,
So there's some issues like that.
Let's
There's
let
the-
me be real specific and pin you on this for a second. What will we see out of your office on mandatory reporting training? When will it come? And what's it likely to entail?
Well, that's a good question. We are in the process of, again, researching. I have Jennifer Moreno, one of my top staff in the Ledge unit, researching details about the very question you've asked. But our goal is to make sure that the training is adequate, is effective. And you're not going, for whatever reason, sometimes there will be a relationship between the principal and someone else, and the principal may not report, despite whatever training they had. And that's where you need to change the overall culture of accountability. They need to know that they can go to jail if they don't do that. And so that's where I say it's a multi-dimensional approach that's needed, and Jonesville is one step in the right direction.
I mean, right now, you're not even, districts are strongly encouraged to provide the training, and their only obligation is to let the Department of Education know if they
Yes,
decided not to do the training.
We had
And
zero
guess what? We've
reports.
never
Zero
gotten.
reports.
Paul, but
Yeah.
let me suggest to you that those districts that are supposedly doing the training are still the districts that are having problems.
Well, and
And
that may
Antioch's
well
a
be-
case in point.
Right.
Okay?
But the fact that it's not actually even required to start with is
Well,
not a
I
good place to
understand,
start.
but what I'm saying is, as Tom said, we need to figure out what training is working and is
Right,
not.
right.
And I would suggest to you that the district level training in those districts that are doing it ain't working.
Well,
And,
But a whole bunch of them aren't even doing that.
yeah.
this all goes to, I'd like to go back to a much more general question, Tom, something you said, and I think we'll get right back into this at some point. You said earlier, I believe, that we not only had a financial crisis in education,
Right.
we also had
Public confidence
a
crisis.
public confidence crisis. What caused the public confidence crisis?
A combination of things. I think a lack of, focus on education as a priority. Teachers not having the resources, having more crowded classrooms. I think those are some of the key elements. It's not all about money, but money has been a problem. When California was in the top 5 in per pupil spending in the nation, we were in the top 5 in academic performance. People came to California to enjoy our public school system, and they bought houses knowing that most neighborhoods in the state had a pretty strong public education system. As the neglect of the legislature, governors over a couple of decades have seen us fall from top-ranked investment to 47th, 48th, 49th. Our test scores are also 47th, 48th, 49th in math and language arts and science. It's again deplorable. So part of that is the public didn't see they didn't have confidence that kids were going to get the best education. And they saw the system starve for some of the things that they thought should be standard, like arts and music and drama, like having science and having the kind of comprehensive education that many of them had as kids themselves.
Well, okay, and we're talking about a trend line. This didn't happen overnight. There was
Right.
a trend line. That trend line coincides almost exactly with the rise to power of the California Teachers Association statewide, and its influence in politics. I mean, that's the elephant in the living room here, and all of a sudden, this is rising, this is falling. Yes, there are other elements, but if there is a crisis, are we going to trust, frankly, teachers to fix themselves? Because, Joan Buchanan, we like Joan just fine, but Joan is clearly an advocate for teachers and has been in her public life, all of it. So have you. I'm wondering.
Happy to be.
Yeah, I understand that, and I'm not dissing teachers. Believe me, but, I've been one too. I mean, at college level, but I have been. But I wonder if we're not also seeing public confidence eroded because of outcomes. And I've gone round and round with Charlie Reed on this very subject, where Charlie came in here and sat in a chair and said, "Oh my God, the K through 12 is just doing this horrible job, and we have to do all this remediation at Cal State." And Charlie, 85% of the teachers came from Cal State that you're complaining about. Now, where is the problem here? And so I think it's a bigger question that goes to this issue of, okay, we're going to trust the education establishment to fix itself when it obviously hasn't been working.
Yeah. Well, I have a different angle on it, but I think that's a common perception and common belief in California. You have a combination of
because
factors.
frankly, I'd like to fix this. I don't want it to become adversarial. I want to fix it.
Yes, and I think that's where we all are. I think when you see an investment in the kind of professional development, first I'm working with the California State Universities and the Loyola Marymount. Just talked to the Dean of Education there yesterday, who sits on the CTC, the California Credentialing Commission. Part of our blueprint says we need to go back and look at how we're teaching teachers to become teachers and administrators, and make sure that they can deal with effectively with English learners, who are a quarter of our population, soon to be perhaps a third of our student population. How do we deal with the professional development for the Common Core so they're more effective teachers? One thing that's worked really well are these pilot projects on linked learning and the partnership academies, and another general education investment that we did through a bill that I authored, the Quality Education Investment Act, QIA. And that's in 500 schools, the lowest 500 schools performing in the state. And what we invested in was team building, where teachers have time out to share once a week. They get together and share results of how their students are doing in certain kinds of math development, certain types of language arts development. They share their assessments and data, and they share their best practices. So if 5 teachers are getting together and one of them is behind by 15 or 20% where the other teachers are, and they have the same demographic mix of kids, then they sort of work together to see, well, how can we help this teacher? Or one teacher's kids are 15-20% ahead of the rest of the kids, then they go visit that teacher's class. There's a trust build. Maryland Avenue Elementary School in Livermore is a great example. Their SAT, their star scores went up considerably after they did this team building. So these 500 schools have an extra $250,000 a year, and they've basically invested in professional development, in also reaching out to parents. You know, our demographics have changed. I mean, and I know we can compare to Texas and New York and Florida, and we should, but we have 1/4 of our kids growing up in poverty without health care. Only 1 in 5 of our kids in California schools has a parent with a high school diploma. So we have a starting point where a lot of students don't have books at home, let alone computers, and so they're not as ready as they should be to succeed. So it's a combination of factors. Boost the teaching profession by providing help at the induction phase, PAR, where professionals are helping counsel to better professional results, the teachers who are struggling, and helping coach out of the profession those who can't make it and aren't making progress. So those are a couple of things I would say.
Let's talk about the one undiscussed piece to that, that discussion in this room has gone back as far as Gray Davis sitting where you're sitting. So that's how far back we're talking now. But the element of there are people in the workforces out there, go back to the Jaime Escalante days, who would like to go in, maybe later in life, whatever, or, middle life, they would like to go into teaching. They feel called to go into teaching.
Yes.
They are so daunted by the process and where they have to start, and that that this whole notion of, okay, they could be a good teacher and they could really help the kids, and they may have practical knowledge, but they don't have the credentialing and stuff. Is there some place for that? And secondly, because I know you're probably tight on time, the other thing I wanted to make sure we get to, because we've talked about it before, but I'd like to hear an update on the get away from the college thing and get to the other track, the career track. Those two things.
Well, yes, there's room and need, because for CTE, some of the most effective people are people who have actually been there, because most teachers have been teachers. They've been in school all their lives, and so some of these rich partnerships, like Northrop Grumman has a partnership with a couple of schools. They provide internships where students can come from the school, go learn all the different cool things that are going on at Northrop Grumman. They're building a spaceship that's going to go to 1 million miles in space, and with a telescope that's going to unfold from a radio signal from Earth, it's going to unfold this incredibly huge telescope that's going to look back to the beginning of the universe, to about 13 billion years ago, before stars were formed. And these kids are all excited. And then these professionals, these engineers, these scientists, these space guys, they come and speak at the school, get kids excited. And they even donated about $100,000 technology center, which the employees at Northrop Grumman built. So you build these kind of relationships, but some of the skilled teachers are that know auto mechanics. I mean, that's a job that you can't export. We need to have a system that repairs our cars here, and a workforce that can do that. So working in those kind of areas, you need some specialists. And if you ask them mid-career to take time out for a year and a half to do the normal course of things, you may not get them.
Won't.
So how do you do this? We're working on that as part of what our review with the CTC is. Now, the second part of your question was more career education.
More career education.
Well, that's the partnership academies. Again, is a way to look at that. I'm putting a big emphasis on that, because 18 to 19% of the kids that enter high school in California will go on and get a 4-year degree, and let's double that. We want more kids to go to college, be ready for careers in STEM or whatever we need in the new economy. But that's still, rounded up, that's only 40%. So the question is, what about the other 60%? And we're not speaking to them because we're saying that college is the only choice. That's sort of a message that many of our students get. And sometimes they get it from their parents as well as from the system. And yet they're skilled. There's different types of intelligences. And these young people, good with their hands, they, brain, hand together, they're creative, or they like to work outdoors. There's a variety of pathways that we need to say are honorable, and work to make sure that they're available. And that's part of my thrust in this report and in the new CTE standards that the state board just recently adopted, is to offer more opportunities. So that's a big priority of mine.
Because when my toilet backs up, I want a plumber, not an English lit major.
Well, I just had a plumbing problem at my house. I was telling Paul I almost going to be a little bit late, but we've got the plumber there. But normally, this is Friday. Normally, my plumbing goes out on Saturday or Sunday, and they get a little overtime, and it's pretty good.
But
no,
seriously,
it is serious.
And that line of work is, as you say, it's honest work. Anybody who's ever done it knows this is really honest work.
And it's creative, and you got to think, and you got to know to measure. You got to have,
gotta have decent math skills. You got to have.
And now increasingly good communication skills, and how to use the computer as a way to store your data and learn from. And
as you spoke about auto mechanics, I mean, I'm a car guy, so anybody who thinks auto mechanics is about butterfly valves and carburetors is doing vintage cars, because everything now is computer. Everything.
I'm actually working with Austin Butner, who was LA's vice mayor in terms of economic development, on an auto repair, track, and he's working with Pesky, and is it Penske? Not Pesky, Penske. We want to be pesky about getting more career technical education choices. But seriously, that's and why should a young person have to graduate from high school and then go to an auto mechanic training school and spend 20, 30, 50 grand and have debt before they start? Why not have high school programs where they can get their certificate while they're in high school? And that's one of our goals of this, is to see how could we get certified graduates. They graduate from high school, but they also have a certificate where they can go to work in the industry, and it's recognized by the industry as a valid certificate of competency in those areas. The third area, by the way, is the whole child, teaching the whole child, early learning. My administration's the first to get Race to Top money. We got it on early learning. I won't go into detail, but obviously you know that having kids have quality childcare in preschool. We run preschools, we run childcare. We have about 500,000 students in these areas, but they have to have that quality opportunity, especially if they're coming from poverty, and especially if they're coming with an English learner challenge. Chronic absences, we're really focusing down on if you're not there, you can't learn. If you're sick, we want to get our kids connected to health care. If you're sick and absent, if you're diabetic, if you're not in good health, you're not going to focus and learn as well while you're in class. Chronic absences, chronic absenteeism is when you're absent 10% or more of the time. In Oakland, parts of Los Angeles, kindergartners are absent 18 to 20% of the time. Kindergartners. And so we're developing a system. We've done some training, we're doing some additional workshops. Many districts have embraced this system. Basically is to have data tracks that the principal looks at regularly and sees the patterns of absences, and then has a team that goes and calls that parent, where's your child, why isn't your child here? It can start at the cajole and here's your responsibility morally and legally to have your child in school. It can get harder, so the Kamala Harris did the San Francisco approach, and we've now begun to implement that, where districts then have a harder letter saying you have a legal obligation to get your child in school. But a child who's behind at that level, by the time they're in 8th grade, 9th grade, they've missed a year of education. And they're behind all the time. They're behind and lost in their education.
Well, interestingly, on that issue, to me, it's interesting that it's not just the education establishment who believes that, but kind of more enlightened and informed police chiefs, like, for instance, Chris Magnus in Richmond, and
absolutely,
and Anthony Batts before in Oakland. But it seems to me that it takes that element to really effectively get this
Fight
done.
Crime, Invest in Kids is right there with us on it, and you're absolutely right.
The San Diego DA's office has that full-time person allocated to theirs.
Yes.
I mean, it's
so there's different models, different counties are working out, but we're encouraging it because, by the way, once you get those kids back in school, the school gets more ADA. So you have a little upfront investment to get a system, but it also goes to knocking on the door at the house and home visits and mom and dad, how come Johnny's not at school? And sometimes they'll find that Johnny is 7 years old and there's a 3-year-old sister that Johnny's being asked to stay at home because there's no one to watch 3-year-old sister, or grandma's in a wheelchair and 8-year-old Sally has to stay home to make sure grandma's okay during the day. So then social services can come in and fix that problem and make sure that kid's getting to school and find whether it's adult respite care or some other factor that, so basically you can drop chronic absenteeism from an 18 to 20% level down to way low in the 4 or 5% level. And so we're going to continue to do a lot of workshops in that regard.
I wonder, is there an element there to be had, to be explored, and maybe it already is, and I don't know about it. We're talking about police, and we're talking about prosecution, and we're talking about schools, but what about CPS? Because CPS sees a lot of what you're talking about, this kind of thing, and CPS is involvement at the real grassroots level. They walk in and see, this is what, and although those are confidential reports, I think if you look at them, without names, and you just look at numbers, the numbers are staggering at how often kids are being cheated because of their living circumstance.
Yes.
Well, and the research is interesting because it shows that the kids who early on, when they're kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade, where the parents are writing the excuse, Johnny was sick, he couldn't come, those are the same kids that 6-10 years later, they're ditching school. Right?
Well, they're writing their own excuses.
Yeah, exactly.
And we know if they're behind by 3rd grade and they can't read, or they're weak in their reading skills, then they get behind in every subject and they get more and more frustrated. And those are the candidates for dropout. They're going to be in the criminal justice system. So getting here early, and then parents who are truly neglectful, and
now you're back to prosecution.
They're thumbing their nose at the system, or saying, I'm not accountable. Nobody's going to catch up with me. We need to go after them and make sure that they're legally advised and then prosecute if they don't get their act together for their kids.
And then another really bad element on that, another elephant, is that many times the reason for that is not that they're necessarily recalcitrant, but that they're strung out, or they're druggies, or they're
Yes.
they're,
Yes.
they're
Yes, and then you
alcoholics
go
or
and
whatever.
intervene
Right.
and get them on a, addiction, shake the addiction program. We're also working in the same regard, looking at the home life some kids have, and it's chaotic. There's criminal, there's drug things going on. They go to school and they get in a fight with the first period teacher. They verbally, not a fight, but a verbal altercation. What we're seeing is a disproportionate number of African American males, particularly, and some disproportionate number of Latino males that are suspended and then, in more serious cases, expelled. But when you suspend them and expel them, they're just sort of a downward spiral and it may have just been that first period teacher, and then something happened at home, they came to school, and they got in a bit of a verbal, and so suspending them and having them out in the neighborhood or in the streets, again, the police are with us on this, we're looking at on-campus suspension, so that they're and maybe they can go to the other classes they have, so they don't get, if the English classes where they had the trouble with that teacher, whatever it was, and we're not talking violent kind of trouble, we're talking more like verbal, acting out, speaking out, then why take them out of math class and science class and social studies class if they're well behaved and they get a support group on campus? So we are looking at programs that will sort of, and there's some legislation to help look at how do we keep those young men from being dropouts and then just burdening us more with costs in the criminal justice
I never
system.
did understand the whole notion of a kid who didn't want to go to school acts up enough so you send him not to school.
Right.
I never got that.
Why?
Yeah.
What? I mean, that's not a punishment
Right.
to him. Although it is ultimately.
Ultimately.
Right.
Ultimately, it is. But I mean, in his mind, that he's out of school,
Yeah.
and that's what he wanted.
Right. So we're all wounded by that.
So do you have what's your recommendation be on the West Contra Costa School District's waiver request?
Favorable, I believe.
Because?
Because they have the capability of paying it back, we believe, and they've balanced their finances. They're out from under the state loan and it's been paid off. I haven't read the full report, but I did check on that, and the staff recommendation is favorable. And I'm generally supportive.
We should have a little bit of news on grad rates here soon, you mentioned.
Coming out Tuesday, we'll be releasing the new graduation and dropout statistics, and it's another nudge up, from where we were in the mid-70s. It's going in the right direction. It's going better for African Americans and for Latino Californian
A nudge
students.
up from where we were in the
Mid-70s graduation rate, so 70%, 72,
Oh,
73.
mid-70.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
Yeah,
Not
I'm thinking-
chronologically.
Wow!
Not
Torlakson
chronologically.
pulling out the 70s. I don't even remember the
Different
70s.
70%.
That's bell-bottom
as opposed to
pants, and
70%.
we're not going there. Let's not go there.
Yeah.
Was it disco or something back then? I can't remember.
Saturday Night Fever.
No, in the 70s percentile, so we're heading in the right direction. But what frustrates me, but then I'm heartened again by seeing the public focus on these issues, paying more attention to public schools, sort of trying to reverse this, crisis in public confidence. We should be at 85 percentile graduation rate. We should be up in the 90s where Finland is, and we can, it's going to take all these efforts and more, and it's going to take real dollars. I mean, I'm already talking about, we can't let those investments just go offline. We need a further public debate of, are we going to continue them in some way to assist in the revitalization of our schools and some of these programs. At least it's worth a debate. The quarter-cent sales tax comes up in
Well, Tom,
about
the
3.5
other-
years.
The other issue that
And
comes in-
55%, by the way, is something I'm supporting for parcel taxes and operational dollars. Another tool for the district. Sorry, Dan,
Yeah,
to
well,
interrupt.
we'll discuss that one.
Okay.
But is there a way, as the bully pulpit guy, is there a way to encourage, and you may be doing it behind the scenes, but if it isn't getting to this level where we're seeing it, then
Mhm.
is there a way to make the reform efforts that are going on all fronts.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to me, school improvement and improvement of outcomes and improvement should not be a partisan issue, and yet it is. And is there a way to make it more bipartisan? Are you able to bring in people from the other side of the aisle, people of, in some sort of meaningful way?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I'm not picking on Joan, but I mean, to have Joan Buchanan leading the by herself, leading the reform efforts for teachers, that has a credibility problem with me. I mean, she's a good person, but I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I know where she's coming from, and I would
Mm-hmm.
love to hear
Mm-hmm.
her with someone else. You know,
Right.
Is there a way to do that? Do you think?
Yes, and in fact, you know, mentioned that I'm in an office that isn't partisan.
Right.
I have very good relations with the Republican leaders. Bob Dutton, when he was a leader, is a good close friend of mine.
Mm-hmm.
We were able to work a lot of deals together on the housing bond, on transportation bond, and education issues. I just was 2 days ago in the office of Kristen Olson, who was the vice chair, the Republican vice chair of the Education Committee. And we had a lot of resonance on a lot of our ideas. And so we have common goals of getting more career readiness, of getting technology in our schools, of not having such a high dropout rate, and restoring some of that greatness that we've enjoyed in the past. So I am working on that. And I think that, and the outreach I'm doing to business, I don't know if you remember Bob Lynchide from Antioch's Chamber of Commerce days. He sees
Wow.
that goes back to my, young city councilman, or first neighborhood advocate, and then city councilman. But we started there together. He's now CSU president of the board of trustees. He's just been appointed chamber manager for San Francisco, and so we've had a talk about, I'm going to put on a workshop with entrepreneurs in San Francisco, which is a little bit of a different tech mix than the Silicon Valley. I'm doing a Silicon Valley tech mix, but I'm meeting with Republican business leaders, independent leaders and Democratic leaders, and we're not talking, it's not ideological, it's all about outcomes, it's all about
I don't
improving the
think
system.
it can be
It
to
shouldn't
be
be.
successful.
Yeah, you're right. And anytime we go, this time there was an extraordinary combination of circumstances where the public lined up with a lot of debate and some doubt at the start behind Governor Brown's measure, but business wasn't as involved as I think they need to be in the next round. And we need to have develop, whether aerospace, computer science, the green economy, technology companies, the biomedical. I'm doing workshops in San Diego. Carl Gardino's helped me put one in Silicon Valley together, Jim Hewlett from TechNet. So we're talking to a group of entrepreneurs who have a lot at stake in the future of their presence in California and their employees' well-being in California, of how we improve the education system. And so we're coming at it from that approach. And you're right, it can't be partisan.
Good to see you guys.
Yeah, good to see you. That was a good